Knuckle up, nerds, because we're about to get into a fight about nothing. Figuratively and literally nothing. This comic from XKCD pretty much says it all. You see, there are people who really want you to put one space at the end of every sentence, and there are some people who think you should put two. Crazy, right? These are the kind of things people start worrying about when survival and any real normal problems have been completely taken off the table. Who doesn't love fighting over nothing? People don't not love fighting over nothing. They do it all the time. Let's lay down the ground rules here. Just like the letters in the alphabet, it is completely arbitrary. Everybody knows it, but hey, the fight's already begun, so somebody's got to win. I should just make a bell noise. Right? Like that. Funny enough, it turns out both sides of the one space, two space conflict make almost the exact same arguments. Each side claims better readability and comprehension. The one spacers say it's because of better sentence flow, and the two spacers say because the beginnings and ends of sentences are easier to identify. Each side also claims that their method is the historical method and therefore takes precedent. What neither of them want you to know is that there have been scientific studies done, and none of them can confirm that one method is inherently more readable or more comprehensible than the other. All the arguments just dissolve down to aesthetics. Do you like this one, or do you like the other one? There's no compelling reason, and certainly not a rational case, for why one space is better than two, or two spaces is better than one. At least not scientifically. But how about historically? One spacers will tell you that all typography texts support them, and that experts say things like, two spaces after a period is totally, completely, and inarguably wrong. Two spacers will point out that it used to be the other way around. Then one spacers will counter by saying that was only for a limited time because of monospaced fonts used by typewriters. But then two spacers will come back and say that in the 1800s, typesetters made spaces between words 1/2 to 1/3 the length of spaces between sentences, and modern PCs don't make those spaces longer than the ones in between words. So there. It sounds like history is kind of a mess on this subject. There's probably only one way to really figure it out. Does this look like one space or two? How about this? One space or two? One more. One space or two? If getting bent out of shape about typography sounds ridiculous, that's only because it is. But it's no more or less ridiculous than, say, debating sports statistics or the relative merits of comic book superheroes or the movies they're in. So, ridiculous? Yes. But let's not get carried away. I mean, we all do ridiculous a little now and again. But let's jump back to the XKCD image, because you see, there's a third option. 9 times out of 10, when somebody's trying to pressure you into choosing between two opposing factions, like Democrat or Republican, Windows or Mac, Coke or Pepsi, there's almost always a third option. And that third option will basically put you on the weirdo fringes of everybody's radar. Yeah, they fight about typography, but you're the weirdo. In this case, the third option doesn't have any real claim on historical precedent, but it is different enough to be worth mentioning. And it's called semantic line feeds, or if you're the famous visionary engineer Buckminster Fuller, you call it ventilated text. I like the second one, so I'm going to use that name. Ventilated text breaks sentences into segments by idea or clause and allows more complicated writing to be better understood. This is what the text looks like normally. This is what it looks like as ventilated text. This kind of text layout not only makes long, complex sentences much easier to understand, it's also much better for automated version control. So a program that compares one file to another can more easily and more accurately identify changes made in the text. People understand it, machines like it, why aren't we just putting line breaks everywhere? Well, the short answer is because it looks like poetry. Back in the 30s, Buckminster Fuller submitted a report that was rejected for being incomprehensible. He resubmitted the exact same report in ventilated text, and the director of research said, "This is lucid, but it's poetry." Needless to say, the director didn't dare submit poetry to be handed up to the board of directors. Shall I compare thee to third quarter earnings? Go figure. So who wins? Which should you use? I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. If you're hotly debating how many spaces come after a period, it doesn't matter which side you're on. You've already lost. To be honest, the one you should use is whichever one your immediate overlord demands. I mean, if your boss or your teacher or your file comparing program that runs your life prefers that you do it their way, well then do it their way. That's pragmatism. Right there. If it really just comes down to preference, what's the worst that can happen? You send an email to someone who sees double spaces and thinks you're an idiot. Or who sees single spaces and really wishes you'd put an extra one in there. Clearly the rules have changed over time, and they're bound to change again in the future. So the safe choice is to follow the typographers and put one space. The rebel choice is to defiantly put two, and if you want to be in tight with artificial intelligence when it takes over the world, you might want to just start ventilating everything now. Ventilate them. That's what the AI will probably be saying about everyone who doesn't write that way. It all comes down to empty space, which, since the idea of nothing is actually an abstract concept, not unlike the infinite, it means empty space on a page is just about as close as we can get to actual nothing. Except, of course, maybe not writing at all, because that might be more nothing. It's like big and little infinites. Nothings and more nothings. How can something be more nothing than something else? And if you've been dying to know what the possibly ventilated text on my shirt says, there you go.